We're going to now move into section 7.2, and we're going to start dealing with substitution. So in 7.1, we looked at graphing. In 7.2, we look at substitution. And then in the last two sections, we're going to be looking at elimination. So we'll get through those as well. So with substitution, this is solving a system by plugging one equation into the other. So this can get very confusing because sometimes we have to, of course, first solve for a variable. And once we solve for a variable, then we can plug it in. So for example, we look at this system right here. So we look at x plus y equals 5 and y equals 3x plus 1. So the big question here is just what are the variables? So notice that we have an x and an x. So one of my variables is x. And I have a y and a y, so my other variable is a y. So notice that the numbers are not variables, even the one in front of the 3. It's just the x can be changing, so that's why it's called a variable, because it can be variable, can change. And y is the same thing. So we have x and y in both of those cases. And that's really just the first step in understanding what a system is. But I do want to point out in this case that what we're going to eventually do is plug y into the first equation. So we have y equals 3x plus 1. We're going to stick this right into this other equation here. And we'll see how to do that as we go through. So just so that you get an idea of the definition. And now we're going to walk through a problem. Okay, so notice that we have two problems here. And I want to make sure it's clear this is a 4, not a y. So that's 34. So we have y equals 3x minus 34. We have y equals 2x minus 5. So notice that we have two equations, exactly what we should have. That means they are a system. We have x and y are my variables. So I'll put vars. So those are my variables there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug one into the other. So I can either plug the first equation into the second equation, or I can plug the second equation into the first equation. So we're going to go ahead and do the latter. We're going to do the second equation into the first. So notice that I have a y here and a y here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what y is equal to, and I'm going to plug it in right there. So I'm going to move it right over there. So when I do that, I get 2x minus 5, and then I get equals 3x minus 30, and I'll make sure that's a little more clear for 34. So notice I plugged in the y here. The y went directly where that, or the blue part went right directly where the y was, and I just plugged it in here, and then I just left the rest of it alone. And then now you notice I have an equation that only has an x, which means I can actually solve for x in that particular case. So now we're going to start going through and solving this one. So of course I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides, subtract 3x. Those will cancel. I get negative x here, or negative 1x, minus 5 equals negative 34. I'm then going to add 5 to both sides. Those will cancel, so I get x equals negative x. Forgot about that negative there. Negative x equals negative 29, and then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. So when I divide both sides by negative 1, the negatives cancel on both sides. So x equals positive 29. So that's one of our answers. Remember, when we're going through these types of problems, we're solving for an x and we're solving for a y. So we're solving for both of those variables. Okay, so now based on that, I have to figure out what y is. So now you notice that I have an x value. I'm going to look at these two equations up here. Both of them are solved for y, so I can plug this number 29 into either equation. So I can plug it in here, or I can plug it in here. So the way that I would do that, let's go ahead and plug it in. And notice you want to see what's easier. So notice I have 3 times 29. That's going to be a big number. And 2 times 29, it's still a big number, but not as big as 3 times 29. So I'm going to use the second equation, y equals 2x minus 5. So I'm going to use that equation. So I have y equals 2 times x, and my x value is 29. And then I have minus 5. So the last part of my equation is minus 5. So notice what I did is, here's my equation, y equals 2x minus 5. I plugged in a 29 for x. And so then in this particular case, I get y equals 58 minus 5, and that is 53. So my answer is 29 and 53. So that would be my answer that I would have for the first one. So this is kind of the easiest setup when both of the equations are solved for y. I can just plug one into the other pretty easily and be able to solve it. So we're going to get into some more complicated problems as we go along the next videos.